Frank W. Thall. I was in the Seabees, associated with and a member of the 24th Naval Construction Battalion. And I was discharged as ship fitter, 3rd class, from the Seabees, as one of the last people to be discharged because I was single and I was young. So I served also with a maintenance outfit of Seabees, which I believe was the 521 unit. To this day, we of the 24th still are active because we have a yearly meeting of all the Seabees that belong to the 24th. And so far, what I know of is that there's only 2 of us that are left. I was still a civilian, and I remember it so well that at that time where we were living, I was going down to be with my friends that day, and that's when I heard that the Pearl Harbor was bombed. A sneak attack by the Japanese, which, as President Roosevelt at that time said, it is a thing that will live in infamy. The bombing of Pearl Harbor. I knew eventually that I would be drafted, and I did not want to be in the Army, especially the infantry. So I went to the Navy recruiters, and I wanted to enlist. And they looked at me and they told me, they asked me how old I was, and I told them I was 18, I believe, and they did not believe me. They told me to go home, get my birth certificate, and then come back. That I did, and then they accepted me. Oh yes, I was one of the lucky ones, and I was put on the dynamite crew. And we would work from 6 in the morning to 12 noon. Then there would be another shift from 12 to 6. Being that I had a big mouth and I could be heard, they had me shout out when they were ready to dynamite that there was fire in the hole. And then they would turn the hell box on and the explosion would blow the whole section of this coral mountain down. And that was used for airstrips, roads, docks. The first time we went out, I was a replacement for the 24th Battalion. We were only in boot training for about 6 weeks when they split the outfit. Some went to Alaska and the others went to the Pacific. And I thank God I did not go to Alaska. And we spent the first time out about 2.5 years. But it wasn't all bombs and machine guns and all that. We got a new commander, and everyone was thankful because the commander we had at that time was a Navy commander who was put on the beach because he docked a ship of the Navy, and that's where they put him. For some unknown reason, which I don't dispute because we were all happy, he was released to duty, and we got a new commander, and his name was LeBlanc. If you ever had a prince of a commander, it was him. He was always concerned about his men. And we had a weigh-in one day, and it come to that every man had lost at least 30 pounds. And we were sent to New Zealand for rehabilitation, which was a big mistake because fellas had a wild time and needed to go back to the islands to rest. We were welcomed in all these towns by the ladies. And I believe to this day, if they didn't send us out the second time, most of us would have been dead from association and drinking. And from there, we went to another island and did some work before we were sent home for the first time. And we were given a 30-day leave. And I didn't have enough time to go home, so I went to see my brother, who was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and he was a sergeant. I don't know if he was concerned or really jealous that I was overseas and he was still here in the States. And he volunteered to go overseas. And on their tour, or whatever you want to call it, he was put on the front because of his rank as a lookout. And he served his 4 hours, and the lieutenant came to him and asked him if he could stand another tour because his relief man was ill. And he said yes. And with that, the Germans started to bomb. And he, being on the front line, had a shell, or whatever they called them, explode right in front of him. And it knocked him down. At that time, was sent to France, and from France he was sent to the States, never to go overseas again. When we were in Munda, when we came over from Vandover in the LCVs, standing up because they were big, they were for vehicles and heavy equipment. And all our sea bags and mattress bags were just put on the beach. And they were all piled up, and I said, I'm not gonna go through all those, I'm gonna wait and let them all get their own. And I did that, and so there was only a few bags there, and I took my sea bag from the beach, and I had to cross the airstrip. So when I got my both bags up on the airstrip, lo and behold, I looked up and there was a Japanese Zero zooming down on me. And the first thing that came into my mind was to take my sea bag and mattress bag for protection, which we were taught in boot training. So in doing that, when the Japanese fighter plane made his first dive at me, and I laid back on the ground between the two bags and looked up, and he just zooped right past me. And I said, well, I guess he's going to hit me when he comes back. And he did turn around and come back, and he did the same thing, but he did not fire. And on his last swoop, it was made the third swoop, to position me to shoot me or whatever, he was low enough that I could see him in his cockpit. And with that, he looked down at me and he smiled and he saluted me and he flew away. And that was the most trying time of the war that I believe I was ever in. And he smiled and he just flew away. I often wonder if he got shot down by the Marines with their big guns and all. And I think that's when I started to get gray hair. And also, when he left, to my surprise, there were two Japanese bombers. They called them Bettys. There were two Indian bombers, and they were coming down this opening to the airstrip, but they never made it because the Marines shot them down. That was another blessing. We first went to Guadalcanal, and we did some work there. Not much, because we were going to keep moving up the line, and lo and behold, they split the outfit and sent two companies on ahead, and the other companies stayed behind until they were called to the front. And in the process of that landing at Vandova, we lost 21 men and 2 officers. 2 officers both came from the same state and the same town. They were lieutenants. They were JG lieutenants. And if I'm right, I think that's the only one we lost, which was enough. We went from Guadalcanal up to Vandova, and from Vandova we went over to Munda, and on Munda we made the landing field larger to bring in Billy Mitchell, 2 Indian bombers, to go up the line with less distance to travel. They would refuel there and load up with bombs. And I was very thankful that we bypassed Iwo Jima, because that was a mess, as everybody knows. But I did not see the raising of the flag by those men. But once in a while we would get a newsletter, written by whom I don't know, would tell us about where we were, and how advanced we were and how close to the end of the war were we getting, and when we were going to invade Japan, which thank God never happened, because everyone that was on Okinawa, as I said, was slated for the sweep of the Japanese off of Okinawa into the sea. And Harry ordered the A-bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And I felt sorry for those people, but Japanese brought it on their own people. And the so-called king, or whatever he was called, on his white horse, thought that they for sure could take the Americans with ease because of their position of fighting another war in Europe. But to their surprise, the American boys answered the call of their country and did a great job. At that time, whatever we had to eat, whichever was K-rations or whatever, I was eating, and I think in my own words and imagination that Harry Truman said, we can't wait for Frank to finish his dinner, so drop the A-bomb. Oh yeah, the fellas took their rifles and stuff like that, BARs, and there was bullets flying all over. I don't know if it really changed me too much, but like I said, I'll never forget being in that position of being trapped on the airstrip in Munda by the Japanese Zero. After we were married for a period of time and lived in this 3-room apartment that was made an apartment out of this large attic. It had those old-fashioned windows that had the iron pulleys on them, and the cord broke, and the window come down, and I flew out of bed onto the floor, and my wife woke up and she said, "What are you doing down there?" I said, "Oh, you wouldn't understand." So she said, "Try me." And I told her that that window coming down the way it did remind me of when I was caught on the airstrip, but only the window sounded like a machine gun. Well, I'm glad that we have Veterans Day because it shows us that people really honor their veterans with their parades. It means liberty, and if you don't respect the American flag, you can just pack up and leave and find out what you missed not being in America.